Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark. Story 1. We found a suicide map, and my friends pinned my location there. I wasn't ready to die. I'm not really into horror. Never have been. But to make friends, you have to blend in first. You laugh at the jokes, play their games, ignore the red flags, until you know which ones are real. Looking back, I didn't make the best decision. You might hate me for it, but I did what I could. It started when my friends forced me to play a game. I had a suspicion they only wanted me there because they liked laughing at how I cried during horror games. But I let it slide. We were in my apartment one weekend. I was supposed to be home alone. They were trying to download a horror game for free, but the link redirected us to another site. It looked like a map with hundreds of scattered pins. Each one marked a real suicide location. Click on a pin and it showed the photo. The victim's lifeless body on the scene. Was that even legal? My friends looked fascinated. I thought it was disturbing, but I kept quiet. Didn't want to be the buzzkill. Not in high school. That's basically social suicide. At the top of the site, in small gray text, it read, "Please read the rules before usage." But nobody seemed to care. Apparently, you could add your own pins. They started marking random addresses with yellow pins. 5 or 6 addresses, just for curiosity. The ones already there were red. I didn't like it. The red ones felt wrong. Then one of the 4 friends grinned. "Yo, Alex, look." He zoomed in on my street, my building, and pinned my apartment. I laughed along, even though my stomach twisted. At the end, they left me alone, with that game still open in my browser, even though they promised to stay the night. That night, I went back to the site. I wanted to delete the pins, especially mine, but I couldn't. That's when I checked the rules. You may add and move pins. You cannot delete them. So I had no option. The next day, my parents came home. My sister, too. She'd snuck out to see her boyfriend while the house was empty. Everything felt normal again, like nothing ever happened. That night, I was watching TV with my dad when a breaking news report came on. A suicide case of an entire family. The house on the screen looked familiar. Then the address appeared. I remember where I saw it. I stood up quietly. Without making a commotion, I walked to my room, opened the site. Only a few yellow pins were left, and I found what I was looking for. My hands shook as I clicked. It was the same address, the same house, and the photos. I checked the other pins that had turned red. More suicide photos. Then, right in front of me, another yellow pin turned red. Only one yellow pin remained. Mine. I froze, then clicked it. The image loaded slowly. It was me, sitting at my desk. I turned to the window. The curtain moved, a soft shift like breath. My chest clenched. I rose, step by step, as if something unseen was dragging the air behind me. I pulled the curtain open, and there she was, standing just outside the glass. 14 floors up. She smiled softly. "I am sorry for peeking, but can you help me? Please let me in." I stared at her. "How did you climb to the 14th floor?" Her face twitched. She lunged at the window. I slammed it shut and locked it. Her smile twisted, stretched unnaturally wide. She began pounding on the glass, screaming, "You have to die, you have to die, you pinned the location, you have to die." I backed away. Then I remembered, you can't delete the pins, but you can move them. I scrambled to the computer, clicked on the yellow pin over my apartment, and dragged it anywhere, just somewhere else. The banging stopped. I turned around. She was smiling, peaceful. Then she crawled down the building, disappearing. I sat there, breathing hard, shaking as my heart pounded, and I almost teared up. I looked back at the monitor to see where I pinned it, and it hovered over an address I didn't recognize. An orphanage. I stared at it, then I moved it to the house of a friend who pinned me. The news showed another case a few days later. Another suicide. Another whole family. I didn't want this to happen to anyone. I didn't mean for anyone else to die. I started digging, looking for more info on the site. Most of it was garbage, but I found one line that stuck. When a specific address is pinned, all current residents will die. It will be ruled as suicide. This isn't a game. It's murder. Paranormal murder. I can't forgive myself. Even if I did it to live, to save my family, and I still go back to the site, just to make sure no one ever moves a pin back to me. Story 2. I'm a park ranger at Yellowstone. The old faithful geyser isn't what you think it is. I've worked at Yellowstone National Park for over 12 years, long enough to stop believing in most tourist stories, long enough to know the difference between a bobcat scream and a person's, long enough to recognize the smell of volcanic sulfur from the stench of something off. I started as a seasonal ranger in the summer of 2013, mostly working trails and assisting the interpretation staff around Old Faithful. The geyser's predictability is a miracle in its own right. But what always struck me as strange was how we treated it like a performance. Every 90 minutes or so, hundreds of tourists crowd around, cameras ready, gasping as the steam bellows upward in a flawless, timed display, like it's on cue, like it knows we're watching. I didn't think much of it at first. Geysers are geothermal vents, hot groundwater heated by magma, textbook stuff. But by year 5, the little things started to get under my skin. First was the sound. Old Faithful doesn't just roar. Right before each eruption, if you're close enough, say on the wrong side of the rope, there's a faint tone beneath the hiss. A whistling, but deeper, more musical. I once compared it to an old wind-up music box, slowed down and half melted. At first, I thought it was machinery, maybe seismic instruments humming inside the pit, but it wasn't regular. Some eruptions had it, some didn't, and when it did happen, the dogs in the crowd would whine. Children would cover their ears, and one time, I swear to God, a woman fainted before the water even sprayed. She hit the pavement, hard. Later said she heard her dead father's voice in the steam. We brushed it off. Heat stroke, altitude sickness, typical park issues. But it kept happening. The turning point for me was late September, during the shoulder season. Fewer crowds, colder winds. Bison lumbered through the fog in slow silhouettes. I was assigned a midnight perimeter check, routine for off-season. Flashlight in hand, radio clipped to my vest, boots crunching the frozen gravel path around Old Faithful. The geyser doesn't erupt like clockwork at night. That's a myth. It's mostly silent, sleeping. But at 12:47 a.m., it went off. No warning, no pre-bubbling, no seismic trigger. Just a single sharp whistle that cracked through the cold, followed by a surge of water, so fast it shook the ground. I fell on my ass. Steam flooded the clearing, dense, blinding, and then I heard something that still haunts me. Footsteps, coming from inside the steam. Not loud, not heavy, just wet, barefoot, one after another. I called out, thinking someone had jumped the fence. You need to come back to the trail. The steps paused, then turned, and ran directly at me. I couldn't see a damn thing, just fog and shadows. My flashlight hit nothing but vapor, but the sound was real, getting louder, faster. I raised my radio. Before I could press the button, the footsteps stopped inches from my face, and something whispered, "You're not the one we're waiting for." The fog cleared within seconds. Nothing was there. No footprints. No water on the ground. Just me, trembling, alone in the silence. I filed the report as a steam pocket release. Didn't mention the voice. Didn't mention how the batteries in my radio melted inside the casing. But I knew what I heard, and it was only the beginning. There's an old utility basement beneath the Upper Geyser Basin Lodge that most visitors, and even a lot of staff, don't know about. half of it sealed. The other half is used for storage. Forgotten hoses, rusted electrical panels, boxes of worn-out rain ponchos with logos that haven't been used since the 80s. I didn't mean to find the journal. I was down there looking for a portable generator during a brief power outage. Some storm knocked half the grid offline, and we were trying to keep guests from freezing upstairs. It was buried behind a stack of folded cot frames in a milk crate that smelled like mildew and scorched copper. Black leather, water damaged, no name on the cover. Inside were dozens of entries written in the same tight, blocky handwriting. The dates range from 1991 to 1996. Pages were warped, but the ink hadn't bled, and the entries weren't casual field notes. They were obsessions. Whoever wrote, it was watching Old Faithful long before I ever got here. October 3rd, 1991, 2:11 a.m. Eruption was early again. Second time this week, but not listed in the logs. No seismic activity. Nothing from the sensors. Just started. Saw something in the plume. Not a figure. Not exactly. A ripple. Like something huge pressed its face up against the inside of the earth. Like it was listening. January 19th, 1992, 1:04 a.m. They called it a steam burp again. I know better. I saw the dogs bolt before the eruption. One ran headfirst into a post. The guest didn't notice, but the air vibrated. One of the newer rangers vomited. Said he smelled blood in the fog. April 25th, 1994, undated. I saw her again, standing in the mist, wearing my wife's coat, but she's been dead 10 years. She mouthed something, same words as last time. He's waking up. Dozens of pages like that. Some were crossed out, others circled, but one word appeared over and over, in the margins, in all caps. Even once burned into a page with what looked like a cigarette. Sentinel. The last entry was short. August 11th, 1996. I think I was chosen. I think that's what they want. I've stopped dreaming in English. I need to go under. And that was it. No name. No signature. No follow-up. I asked the lodge director if there was ever a ranger station here in the 90s who just disappeared. He went quiet for a moment, then said, "You mean Ellis?" "Yeah, real quiet guy. Kind of a loner. Went out for a thermal inspection and never came back. They think he slipped into a fumarole, but they never found a body." I didn't tell him about the journal. Didn't tell him I started dreaming in steam that night. The next morning, Old Faithful erupted 26 minutes early. Only one person was standing near the barrier fence. A kid in a red hoodie. Everyone else was asleep. There wasn't supposed to be a show, but it went off anyway. And when I got closer, the boy turned to me and asked, "Are you the new Sentinel?" I waited 3 days before opening the journal again. I kept it tucked in the bottom of my locker, beneath an emergency blanket, and an old map of the lower loop. I tried to forget it. I couldn't. I kept hearing the kid's voice. Asterisk, "Are you the new Sentinel?" Asterisk. The way he said it wasn't casual. It wasn't a question. It was more like he was confirming something he already knew. I asked around. No one on staff saw a boy that night. No parents reported a missing child. No red hoodie. I even checked with the other rangers on night shift. One of them swore up and down that nobody was within 500 feet of the geyser when it erupted, but I know what I saw, and I knew it wasn't the last time I'd see him. I remembered the name the lodge director mentioned, Ranger Ellis. I dug through old service records. Most had been digitized by 2001, but Ellis' file was thin, just a printed folder. Name, DOB, hire date, and one final entry. Presumed dead, body unrecovered. No burial, no forwarding address. But something was odd. His last listed emergency contact was blacked out, not just crossed out, redacted, like someone took a marker and scrubbed the name from existence. I took a day off and drove out to the northwestern edge of the park, near a forgotten ranger outpost called Fire Loop Ridge. It's not open to the public. It used to be a lookout before the main station took over. Most maps don't even list it anymore. But I'd heard rumors from older staff that Ellis built a cabin out there, off-grid, no permits. No one ever wanted to check. I found it just before dusk. No lights, no trail, just a small A-frame shack nestled behind a curtain of pine, about a mile off the service road. The door was cracked. Inside, shelves lined with old geological surveys, laminated maps, and Polaroids, dozens of them, all of Old Faithful, but taken at weird angles, from the ground, from the treetops. One even looked like it was taken from inside the steam plume, impossible as that sounds. Then I saw him, sitting in the corner, thin, pale, gray, beard down to his chest. He didn't even flinch when I stepped in, just looked up at me with sunken eyes and said, "You opened the journal, didn't you?" His name was Thomas Ellis, but he made me call him Tom. He didn't speak for long, just long enough to tell me one thing. The geyser isn't just geothermal. It's biological. It has a pulse. And when it calls for a sentinel, someone always answers. I asked him what that meant. He just shook his head, then said something I didn't understand until much later. The last eruption won't be water. He gave me a rusted thermal imaging sheet, old tech, printed on transparent paper. It showed the geyser cone from above, but beneath it was a shape, rounded, almost skeletal, and it was moving, very slowly, like something turning over in its sleep. Tom wouldn't speak anymore. He asked me to leave. Begged me, actually. As I stepped out, I heard him whisper, "Tell them not to dig." I never saw him again. The next morning, the USGS conducted an unscheduled scan of Old Faithful. A report was filed internally. I wasn't supposed to see it, but one of the techs left the tablet unlocked. I saw 3 words highlighted in red across the core data readout: vascular geothermal anomaly. That night, I dreamed I was underground, curled in steam, listening to a heartbeat that wasn't mine. The visitor center burned down 2 nights after I visited Ellis. I was the first to see the smoke. 2:11 a.m. exactly. I was walking the lower basin trail, trying to clear my head, when I noticed a flicker behind the tree lean, orange glow pulsing to the steam like fireflies trapped in glass. I radioed it in. Response came fast, too fast. Before I even finished my sentence, my supervisor, Jim Collins, came through loud and clear. "Disregard that. We're aware of the situation." His voice was calm. Too calm. By the time I got back to the visitor center, it was over. No flames, no ash, no structural damage. Just a black scorch mark across the northern wall, in the shape of a hand. 5 fingers, each one stretching nearly 6 feet high. No one else saw it. By morning, the wall had been repainted. Fresh white, glossy, like nothing happened. When I asked Jim what the hell was going on, he looked at me with the same expression you'd give a wild animal in the road. Not anger, not pity, just distance. There are things older than the park. We maintain the story. That's our job. He didn't explain further. Didn't need to. The tremors started the next night, always at 2:09 a.m. The park's seismic activity is monitored constantly. Minor shifts aren't unusual, but this was different. These weren't quakes. They were pulses. Short, rhythmic, deep. We checked the seismograph logs. The pattern wasn't random. It was repeating. 5 beats. Pause. 5 beats. Pause. Like something knocking. Ellis' words came back to me. The last eruption won't be water. I started sleeping in my truck near the geyser. Couldn't explain why. I just needed to be close. I watched every plume, logged every whistle, listened to the vibrations in the ground. Then, at 2:09 a.m. on the 6th night, Old Faithful erupted again. But this time it didn't spray water. It bled. Thick red vapor shot up into the air, staining the fog like oil in a snow globe. Tourists weren't around to see it. Thank God. But I was. And I swear, inside that crimson mist, I saw a rib cage. Just for a second. Something enormous, curved and hollow, moving, breathing. By the time backup arrived, the mist had cleared. The ground was dry. The air smelled like copper and rot. I didn't file a report. Didn't need to. I wasn't the only one watching that night. There were others in the tree line. Still figures. No flashlights. Just silhouettes. Each wearing red hoodies. The invitation came the next morning. A folded note placed under my truck windshield. No envelope, no name, just a stamped emblem I'd never seen before. A black circle with 3 concentric rings and a single vertical line splitting them. Inside, 5 words. Maintenance briefing. Below, 4 p.m. Alone. I thought it was a joke. Then I saw Jim Collins waiting at the service elevator near the North Rim compound. He didn't smile, just nodded once, held the door, and pressed a key card I'd never seen before. The elevator took us underground, far below anything I knew existed beneath Yellowstone. We arrived at a concrete corridor with no markings. Coal fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The air smelled like clay and sterilizer. Jim led me in silence to a small conference room with mirrored walls and a long table of dark wood. 7 people were already seated. All of them wore gray park ranger uniforms, but none of them had name tags. One woman, the oldest, finally spoke. "Mr. Price, you've been identified as a viable candidate for replacement Sentinel designation. Congratulations." I opened my mouth to protest, but she raised her hand. "You've seen it. You've heard the pulse. You've made contact with the Steamborn. You found Ellis. That qualifies you." The others remained silent. Then she said something I'll never forget. Old Faithful is not a geyser. It is a vent, a pressure valve for something beneath this basin. Something living, sleeping, bound. We are not rangers. We are its custodians. She pulled out a thick folder and opened it to reveal a topographic map of the park, but layered. Each layer represented a different time period. The oldest went back 12,000 years. On every layer, the vent was marked, not as Old Faithful, but as the throat. The being beneath this land is not a creature in the traditional sense, she continued. It has no form, not one we can survive perceiving, but it's active, and over millennia, it's developed sensitivities. It dreams and pulses, feeds on memory. When the pressure builds too high, it must be vented. If not, it finds other ways to release. I thought of the steam, the red mist, the voice in the fog. I asked what the Sentinels were for. She said, to listen, to appease, and to give it what it wants before it wakes up. Then she gave me one final thing, a tape recorder, worn, old, labeled in black marker, Sentinel log number 6, Ellis. I played it that night in my cabin, static at first, then breathing, then Ellis' voice. You don't guard the park. You guard what's under it. You don't patrol trails. You patrol its dreams. You think you work here by accident? You were chosen. Every one of us is chosen. Then a pause. Then his last recorded words. When it learns your name, it uses your voice. I shut off the tape, but the whisper didn't stop. From the back of the room, barely audible, Price. It started with my ID badge. The morning after the briefing, I tried to clock in. My key card didn't work. The digital reader blinked red, chirped once, and rejected it. I went to the front desk. The admin staffer blinked when I gave her my name. Typed it in. Frown. There's no one listed under that name, sir. I laughed, thought she was messing with me. Then she turned the screen so I could see it. No entry. No file. No photo. Asterisk, asterisk. Like I'd never worked there at all. I rushed to the personnel office. Same story. They pulled out the ranger roster for the month. My name was gone. Even the locker I used had been reassigned. My gear? Cleared out. My boots? Gone. My cabin? Locked. Someone else was living in it. I tried to text Jim. No reply. I tried to call. Straight to voicemail. I even drove down to the emergency radio tower. Pinged his private line on our internal ranger channel. Dead silence. But 20 minutes later, I found something taped to my windshield again. A single scrap of paper, torn at the edges. 3 words. The throat remembers. That night, the whisper came again. From my closet. From inside my mirror. It didn't say my name anymore. It just breathed. Not loud. Not threatening. Almost gentle. Like it was savoring the moment. The next day, I found the word throat scratched into the inside of my ranger hat, then on the underside of my coffee mug, then on the mirror in the public restroom by the trailhead, fogged into the glass like condensation. Only I could see it, and every time I blinked it was closer. On the 7th day, I walked the Lower Basin Trail and stopped in front of Old Faithful. It hadn't erupted in over an hour. The tourists had mostly cleared out. Only one man stood near the rope. Gray hoodie, pale skin. I stepped closer. He turned, and he had my face, but older, worn, eyes like glass. He reached out and touched my shoulder, whispered, "You are ready now." I tried to pull away, but my boots locked in place. The ground opened beneath me. The familiar whistle built, but this time it was louder than ever, like 1,000 flutes screaming in unison. Then steam, red, burning, rising. Something grabbed my leg, dragged me down. I woke up underground, surrounded by stone, heat, and breathing walls that pulsed with steam. In front of me, a staircase leading deeper into the crust. And at the bottom, I swear, something was waiting, watching, smiling without a face. I don't know how far I fell. The walls weren't made of stone anymore. Not exactly. They pulsed, flexed. Not with heat, with life. The tunnel beneath Old Faithful wasn't carved by water. It was grown. I don't remember walking. I just remember moving forward, my boots gliding across soft ground that steamed with each step. The air down there wasn't air. It tasted like copper and mushrooms, like lungs that didn't belong to me were doing the breathing. That's when I saw it. A small wooden bench. Old, splintered, and sitting on it, a body. It was Ellis, or what was left of him. His ranger uniform hung like a rag over bone. One eye socket was filled with crystallized ash. His mouth was open, like he'd been whispering something when he died. And in his lap, a second journal. This one wasn't dated like the first. It was organized by name. The first page said, Sentinel 7, Price. Duties begin September 23rd. First breach, September 29th. Vocal infection complete, October 4th. Full integration, October 7th. Collapse event, October 12th. Casualty projection, 37000 plus. My hands trembled. Those dates were in the future, but not by much. The next pages weren't written in English. They weren't even written in one language, just fragments, phrases, symbols, sketches of faces that didn't quite look human. Then, near the end, a phrase repeated over and over. The throat remembers. The mouth learns. The eye will awaken. I dropped the journal, and that's when I heard it. Footsteps, but not from behind me. From inside the wall to my left bulge. A human hand pushed through it. Thin, gray, translucent skin stretched over finger bones that seemed too long. Another arm followed. Then a face pressed into the wall, trying to birth itself forward. But it wasn't alive. It was me, or a version of me. Mouth open, skin steaming. Eyes gone, head tilted. It whispered in my voice, "You were always a dream, not the dreamer." I turned and ran. The tunnel stretched, bent. The laws of space didn't apply anymore. One step forward turned into miles. My radio screamed static, then hissed. Collapse imminent. I emerged at sunrise, crawling from a steam vent 50 yards behind the main visitor center, covered in ash, bleeding from both ears. But I was alive, or at least I thought I was, until I passed a mirror on the maintenance truck and saw his eyes looking back at me. Not mine, his. When I got back to the station, no one recognized me. Not Jim, not the admin staff, not even the maintenance guy I shared lunch breaks with every Thursday for 3 years. "Sorry," he said, backing away. "This area is restricted to park personnel." I told him my name. He tilted his head, then said, "That name's not on the active roster, sir. You'll need to leave." I laughed, pulled out my wallet, showed him my driver's license. He squinted. "That doesn't look like you." But it did. It was me. Same photo, same face, When I looked down at the ID, the eyes were wrong. Too wide, too curious. Like the picture wasn't frozen. Like it was watching me back. I drove to Livingston, Montana, 2 hours north. My brother lives there. Or lived. Anyway, I knocked on his door just after dusk. He answered in pajama pants and a t-shirt, holding a half-finished beer. Looked older than I remembered. Tired. "Can I help you?" he asked. I told him who I was. His smile faded. "Is this a joke?" Then he called for his wife. She came to the door, looked me up and down, and said, "Derek, your brother died in 2017. He fell into a thermal vent at Yellowstone. They never found the body." I drove back in silence. That night, I didn't sleep. I listened, and at exactly 2:09 a.m., I felt again, the pulse, but not from Yellowstone. This one came from the east. I checked the seismic logs. Sure enough, a microquake in Virginia, centered around a small, defunct geyser field near the Shenandoah Valley, a place that had been dormant for 12,000 years. Until now, at 3 a.m., I got a call. Unlisted number. A voice like mine answered, only deeper. It said, "The mouth is open. The sentinels have failed." Then static. The next day, I returned to Yellowstone. Old Faithful didn't erupt. Not once. Instead, the ground trembled. The steam hissed. And the faces in the mist didn't fade. They multiplied. Dozens of them. All of them wearing my face. All of them whispering, "You were never the ranger. You were always the vent." I stopped sleeping on October 11th. Every time I closed my eyes, I fell not into dreams, but into echoes. Downward, always downward, through steaming corridors made of teeth and memory, through caves shaped like lungs, through my own face, stretched across walls that inhaled. Each time I heard voices, not many, just one, mine, speaking before I could think, telling stories I hadn't lived yet, whispering warnings in languages I shouldn't know. But last night, it said something new. You are not a dreamer anymore. You are the dream, and the throat no longer sleeps. I drove straight to the Geyser Basin. Didn't stop for clearance. Didn't stop when I crossed a restricted boundary. Didn't stop when the security lights turned red and the alarms began wailing behind me. Old Faithful stood still, silent, waiting. The ground beneath me wasn't solid anymore. It flexed, and then, just like that, the earth opened, not an eruption, an invitation. I stepped down into the vent. No resistance, no heat, only understanding. The tunnel was smooth, glossy, like the inside of a throat, but it pulsed now, not just with heat, but with intent, like it had finally found the words it needed. Ellis was waiting at the bottom, not dead, not quite alive, either. He stood at the edge of a glowing chasm, his body semi-transparent, skin flickering with images, maps, faces, symbols. "You thought you were the last," he said, "but we are all sentinels now." And then I saw it, across the cavern. Something stirred. Not a creature, not a god, not a thing, but a concept given shape. It had faces, but none of them were real, just masks worn for our sake, for comfort. Behind them, a writhing absence that bent perception like heat over asphalt. Every pulse from Old Faithful had been a heartbeat. Every eruption, a shiver. It hadn't been contained. It had been concentrating, learning, practicing how to wake. And when I saw its eye open, a vertical pupil the size of a bus rotating with colors not meant for daylight, I understood the final truth. The geyser wasn't keeping something buried. It was feeding something inside us. All the sentinels, Ellis, the boy in the red hoodie, the nameless rangers, and finally me, had been conduits. We weren't protecting the park from it. We were helping it remember. The more we learned, the more we described, the more it took form. It needed minds. It needed imagination. It needed narrative. And now it had enough. I woke up this morning on the side of the road, near Gardiner, Montana. No ranger truck. No uniform. Just a handwritten sign next to me, propped up on a rusted shovel. 5 words. You're the story now. Speak. And I am. Because when I stop speaking, when I stop thinking, stop writing, I feel it crawling back up my throat. And I know the next eruption won't be from Yellowstone. It'll be from me. And maybe from you. Story 3. The boy across the street. I used to be the perfect child. I could live up to my parents' expectations, and I could keep up with whatever pace they put me through. My life revolved around their demands, and I was too young to know any better. They were so proud. My mother would put on this radiant smile whenever she heard me play the goujing, and my father would beam with pride when he saw me in the library. They were both very successful in their own ways, and they knew I could be too. But things get more complicated when you get older. When I turned 16, my life looked very different. I had friends. I had interests. I began to consider life outside Yinjiao and the commuter trains. Yes, my parents were happy there, but that didn't mean I'd be happy too. The pace got relentless. 2 days to practice the goujing, extra calligraphy classes in the evening, advanced math tutoring from a private tutor in Beijing 3 times a week. I was supposed to wake up minutes before 6 a.m. without using an alarm clock, cold showers to keep me alert, and the constant reminders: no sugar, no screens, no silliness. My friends at school would have a lot of things going on too, but they still had time for the occasional game, or just hanging out. Play wasn't part of my schedule, and a lot of kids in my class didn't like the way I set the bar too high. To many of them, I was their boy across the street, the one their parents pointed to when they needed an example of how a child was supposed to act. But it was unbearable, and in the end, the cracks started to show. One evening I was up a bit too late, texting a classmate of mine, Licia. She was by all accounts the opposite of me. She was lazy, fun-loving, and absolutely unhinged. And still, she was an absolute delight to spend time with. She was so used to talking to people that she could get them to do whatever she wanted. It was easy to imagine her being more successful than any other kid in class, despite being the lowest performer grade-wise. Of course, my mother wouldn't approve of my new texting habit. She'd burst into my room unannounced to make sure I wasn't on my phone. She'd always have some made-up reason to go in. I need you to finish your milk. Have you scheduled your session with the tutor? Put away your phone. It chafed the fingertips. I'd smile, listen, and finish my milk. I'd double-check my schedule. But all the while, I would be thinking of Licia and how easy it was for her to make me smile. My mother would notice I wasn't paying attention, and whenever she did, she'd say a phrase that had followed me for as long as I could remember. Because, just as I was the bane of my classmates, I had a bane of my own. The boy across the street, Yueming. See, while I may have been viewed as a perfect kid in my class, Yueming was the perfect kid in every class. He was 2 years older than me, but was already the perfect young man on the cusp of taking the world by storm. When Yueming was your age, he'd already finished the national qualifier. Yueming made time for his studies. He can pick any job he wants. Yueming doesn't slack off. He's so handsome. He'll have a beautiful wife someday. You think Yueming has games on his phone? You think that's how he got so successful? It was ceaseless. I had heard that same sentence over and over long before I ever set foot in the school, and I was probably going to hear it long after I stepped out. She'd made me hate this kid so much that I couldn't blame my classmates for, in turn, hating me. To think that I was their Yueming made my stomach hurt. But no matter how much pressure was put on me, my heart would slip out every now and then. I'd spend whatever time I could with Licia and my school friends. Licia found my rigid lifestyle amusing and loved poking fun at it. "You're my project," she'd joke. "And if you stick with me long enough, you might just turn into someone I'd have a beer with." That was all I wanted, more than sharing the commuter train with my dad, or getting a well-earned promotion at some manufacturing company, more than a diploma or a title or a fancy car. Nothing would send butterflies to my stomach faster than the thought of sitting next to Licia and sharing a beer. So whenever I got the time, I'd be with her. even if it cost me everything. This didn't turn out very well. Someone at school snapped a picture of me and Licia and sent it to my parents. Probably someone who was tired of hearing how perfect I was. The picture itself was just the two of us laughing together, but it kind of looked like she was leaning into me. It was perfectly innocent, but that's not the way my parents chose to interpret it. You think I'm old enough to be a grandfather? My dad would yell, "You think this is appropriate?" It didn't matter what I said. They'd already settled on their own narrative, and I wasn't to be trusted. They'd ask me to explain, then reject whatever I said. You think Yueming chased girls at your age? You think he had time for that? And there it was, the wonder child, the boy across the street, ever present, ever perfect. My parents decided to deal with this by making me a more rigid schedule. My days were planned out to the minute, and they had my phone taken away. They called my teachers to make sure they kept an eye on me. But the worst part? They called Licia's parents to make sure they knew what was going on too. Or at least my parents' version of what they thought was going on. I can't imagine what they told them. While my parents were inside having a loud argument with Licia's parents, I went to take out the garbage. I needed some fresh air, and garbage was preferable to whatever circus was going down in that kitchen. I noticed someone across the street also taking out the garbage. Yueming. He'd recently turned 18, and he was about as perfect could be. He could make taking out the garbage look elegant. He had a perfectly pressed shirt, and every hair on his head was cut and shaped and combed. His shoelaces were perfectly even, his pants perfectly fit. He could have been on his way to a job interview. I waved at him, and he waved back. On any other night, I would have left it at that, but I was so frustrated. I could hear my father yelling through the kitchen window. "How do you do it?" I asked him from across the street. "Excuse me?" Yueming asked, "How can you keep this up?" I asked, "How do you do it?" He thought about it for a moment. The September air chilled the sweat beads on my forehead. "I got all the time in the world," he smiled. "Don't you?" As he turned away, I was furious. Maybe he hadn't intended for it to feel like an insult, but it was. I had worked myself to the bone trying to be the perfect son, and I kept falling short. And there he was, acting like it was the simplest thing in the world. I hated him. I figured Licia would hate me too. We didn't talk at school anymore, and I could feel the teacher's eyes on me whenever the two of us were in the same room. I missed talking to her. It's like I couldn't smile without her. The days became painfully slow, and whatever extra effort my parents demanded seemed impossible. Instead of keeping my eyes on my books or looking at my phone, I began to look across the street. Yueming wasn't just a boy across the street anymore. He was a mockery. He became a fixation. I wanted to see him do something imperfect. I needed to see a crack in the veneer. Either he was perfect and I was broken, or he was just as broken as I was. I needed to know what kind of world I lived in. Was I truly not good enough? Or was he masking his faults? Yueming would do everything expected of him. He played the piano. He spoke 4 languages. He could recite poetry by heart. His calligraphy was flawless, and he could hold a pleasant conversation with anyone, young or old. He never had to sacrifice anything, it seemed. He could do everything without skipping a beat. But there was one thing that not a lot of people would see. My bedroom was on the 2nd floor, directly across from Yueming, and at just the right angle and at just the right time of night, I could see something in his room. A little light right by the window. Not every night, but every now and then. That had to be something. Maybe he was on his phone before going to bed. So he wasn't perfect, after all. I wanted to do something or say something, but I didn't just want to throw it in my parents' faces. I wanted something real, not just wild speculation. If I could find what he was doing, I could give my words some real weight. If I could show my parents that the legendary Yueming wasn't the ideal child, maybe they'd ease off the pressure. Maybe I'd even get my phone back. I decided this was the time for me to be brave, to become the kind of person that Licia would like to have a beer with. I decided I was going to steal Yueming's phone. This wasn't as big a deal as it sounds. Our families were pretty close. We had spare keys to go into their home to water their plants whenever they were out of town, so getting in was easy enough. I just had to wait for the right time. I knew exactly where to look, so I just had to get the timing right. Looking back at it now, it was dumb. I was a petty teenage kid who wanted to impress a pretty girl. But you gotta consider that I never rebelled against anything. I had done absolutely everything by the book, and it made me miserable. So this one act was not just to get some air beneath my wings. It was also just to prove to myself that I was my own person, that I could make something of myself that wasn't bound by the will of my parents. So one afternoon, when Yue Ming and his family were away, I took my shot. I made it across the yard and hid in their garden. They had these beautiful yellow lilies and blue sunflowers that his mother cared for. I sometimes helped water them in the summer. I listened closely to make sure no one was moving inside. I knew there'd be no one home. I'd seen them all sit in that car, but I still thought I heard something. There shouldn't be anyone inside, but there were footsteps. I couldn't pinpoint the exact location, though. I thought about calling the whole thing off. But another part of me wanted to see Li Xiao's face when I handed her a stolen phone. She'd laugh until her face turned red. So with that picture in mind, I unlocked the back door with the spare key and slipped inside. There was a sound in the living room, like someone turning the pages of a book. I could hear someone else wandering around upstairs. But that couldn't be. They were all gone. So what was I really hearing? I made my way upstairs. I could hear the electronic thumping of a washing machine. I left the lights off, stayed close to the wall, and leaned into Yue Ming's room. It was about what you expect. Diplomas on the walls. Photos of him shaking hands with local businessmen. Printed out emails singing his praises. The occasional newspaper documenting some notable local achievement. I tried to look past it and try to think of where he might hide something bad. I had to think like him. He did everything himself, so there would be no reason for his parents to suspect anything. He could hide something out in the open, or in the most obvious place. So if I was him, I'd just stick whatever I was trying to hide under the bed. And lo and behold, there was something there. It wasn't a phone. It looked like a plate made of an inch-thick black stone with a reflective surface in the middle. I didn't know what to make of it, but it had a faint glow to it. This was most probably the thing that Yue Ming sat up with late at night. I tried to pull it out, but it was stuck to some kind of branch. It didn't make sense. It was under his bed. Why would he keep debris and branches in his bedroom? I pulled it loose with a snap and heard something in the house shift. A sudden silence. Then footsteps. Hurried footsteps coming up the stairs. Not just one, but maybe 2 or 3 people. Maybe more. I had to think fast. I closed the door and locked it. I opened the bedroom window, hoping no one was out to see me. I put the plate inside my shirt, leaned out, lowered myself down, and dropped. I scraped my knees and palms on the gravel, but I made it instead of heading straight home. I figured I'd take another route, so they wouldn't see me crossing the street. So instead I headed in the opposite direction, to another street, and casually walked back home like I had nothing to hide. I'd blend in with the crowd. I found a plastic bag by the side of the road, which I put the plate in, and by the time I got home, no one suspected a thing. It looked like I was coming home from the store. I wandered up to my room like nothing happened. Not exactly what I'd hoped for, but I'd be damned if I went home empty-handed. But looking across the street to that empty window, I felt my heart skip a beat, like I'd missed something important. There's this gap in the plastic above my ceiling lamp where I could store the plate. I'd found the space years ago when I was cleaning my room, and I'd never seen my mom even close to discovering it. It was a great hiding spot. I had a remote lesson with my Beijing tutor that night, and I tried to be a little more attentive. It was as if I was trying to set things right by being extra good. My parents wouldn't notice, of course, but it felt right to me. This had, all in all, been a tiny act of rebellion. It's not like I'd broken a window or slashed a car tire. I'd just taken a strange, glowing souvenir. That night, after brushing my teeth and getting ready for bed, I took the plate down. I closed the blinds on my window, as to not incriminate myself. If I could see Yue Ming with it, he could surely see me as well. The plate was warm to the touch. It wasn't really like a classic plate you eat off. It was more like a discus, like a rock you might skip across a lake. But bigger, you had to hold it in 2 hands. But what was most surprising was the reflective surface in the middle. It wasn't just a mirror, it was almost like a world in and of itself. And the strangest thing, I couldn't see myself. I sat up in bed, trying to figure the thing out. How could I see the wall behind me? But not me. Where was that faint orange light coming from? The thing had no space for batteries. There was no make or model, no text, nothing. And the stone itself felt natural, like something you might pick from a river. Long after my parents went to bed, I was still awake, holding that plate. What's so special about you? I wondered, what's your deal? And while it couldn't tell me outright, I had a feeling it was going to show me. The next morning, I had a look at it before breakfast. I sat with it in my lap as my dad was getting ready for work, and my mom was milling about in the kitchen. I already had the day planned out, minute to minute. There were no surprises in store. I just had this one quiet moment in the morning, and that'd be it. So I sat there, staring into the plate, tried to imagine what Yueming might have done with it. I didn't have the slightest idea. It looked sort of tacky, like something a tourist might hang on their wall. As my mom called out for breakfast, a resentment settled in my stomach. Like the starting shot for a race, I didn't want to run. I held the plate up to my forehead and sighed. Just let someone else do this. I begged, just let me be me. I heard a click by my bedroom door. I looked over and felt my mouth run dry. There was someone standing in my bedroom. I didn't recognize him at first. A young man with messy hair, like he'd just gotten up. But when he looked back at me, the realization hit me like a truck. It was me. I was looking at myself, peering into the reflective surface of the plate. I could see myself wandering out of my room and getting ready for breakfast. I went to sit down with my parents, and I could speak to them like I was there. It wasn't like controlling a puppet. It was more like living two lives at once. I was in my bedroom, clutching the plate, but I was also downstairs, having breakfast. I could feel the texture of the tablecloth on my fingers, and at the same time, I could feel the stone of the plate. It was disorienting. I missed my mom saying something, and she commented on how distracted I was. My dad caught it immediately. "Stay focused," he said. "You won't catch Yueming off guard, that's for sure." A part of me nodded and acknowledged this. Another part of me, the one still up in my room, grinned. I hid under the bed, clutching the plate. A part of me got ready, went to school, and paid attention in every class. The other me was still at home, skulking around the house. But whenever I put the plate away, I could feel that connection fading. There wouldn't be two of us unless I held it close. This had to be Yueming's secret. He could do it all at once. He was literally living several lives. No wonder he could do everything. He wasn't restricted by a single time and place. Something about this plate allowed him to do several things at once. So I experimented a bit. I made another me, one that would go around the house and clean. All the while, I kept the plate in my lap as I practiced the gouging. It was effortless. Once I got the hang of it, it wasn't a distraction at all. Once I got into the rhythm, it was like a symphony, a harmony of actions, all playing out at the same time. It was beautiful. I got so caught up in it that I didn't realize most of the day had passed. I had gotten so much done without batting an eye. I'd practiced. I'd read a little. I cleaned the house and performed well in all my classes. And I wasn't even tired or resentful. It was easy. And when I wanted it all to stop, I just put the plate away and let my other selves dissipate. One would wander into a bathroom stall and disappear. Another would go into a storage closet or just wait until no one was around to see. And soon it was just me. I hadn't had anything to eat all day, so I decided to make my parents dinner. By the time they got home, they were suspicious, to say the least. I cleaned up a little, I said, and figured you could do with a bit of rest, Mom. "How are you home so quickly?" she asked. "Did you skip class?" "No." We finished with geography. It was an easy test, so I had some time left. "Easy, huh?" my dad said. "What kind of questions were there?" As I finished dinner, I told him about the various questions that had been on the test. I hadn't been there personally, but the memories of me being there remained. I could describe everything, down to the texture of the paper. They didn't know what to say, but the results spoke for themselves. The house was clean, dinner was served, and once those results came in, they'd see I wasn't kidding around. This would continue for a couple of days. I'd hide under the bed with the plate to avoid my mom accidentally spotting two of me at once. One would go to class. Another would stay at home, being tutored online or practicing the gouging. But I could do other things too. I had another me sitting in the library, reading my father's classical books. Another me would make the beds and clean the carpets. And all I had to do was stay in that dark space, holding that plate close to my chest. But it was getting harder and harder to let go. Every time I put that plate away, I would feel them all wither away. It would just be me, and the me that remained wasn't all that impressive. I'd lost some weight from missed meals, and my eyes would be red from forgetting to blink, but I still did well. I could hold a conversation with my father about things I'd read in his library. I could tell my mother about the classes I'd taken, but all the while, they didn't really trust me. I didn't look okay, and that was turning into a problem, but I had a solution. The next day, I had another me dedicated to making sure I was okay under the bed. He handed me lemonade from the kitchen and snacks throughout the day. And when my parents got home, he was the one to hold a conversation with them. He looked perfectly fine. After all, unlike the real me, to him, it was effortless. I could imagine him as the ultimate speaker, and I'd watch my parents beam with pride. It was so heartwarming that a smile stayed on not just my lips, but the lips of all my bodies. But then there was Licia. I still wanted to spend time with her, but there was no way for me to go to school while still holding the plate. I had to stay at home, undisturbed. So what you saw every day in class was me, but not really me. The real me was stuck in the bed, living a dozen little lives at once. I'd forget he was there sometimes. It's hard to get hungry or thirsty when you have 8 different bodies to keep track of at once. If one of them is feeling a bit peckish, you're not going to notice. One afternoon after class, Licia pulled me aside. We just had a couple of seconds before the teachers caught up with us. You know, your parents were really mad, she said. They don't want us to talk anymore. I know, Schoolme said. I'm sorry about that. I still want to talk though, she continued. You're fun. I am. I asked. Sometimes, she agreed. Not always. But you can't be fun all the time, right? Right. She leaned back and looked into the hallway. One of our teachers were coming down to see what we were doing. She turned back to me, grabbed me by the ears, and gave me a big kiss. My heart skipped a beat, and she wandered off like nothing had happened. I just stood there, trying to stop the world from spinning. My first kiss, and it was in a corner next to the janitor's closet. And still, I couldn't stop smiling. That night, as I put away the plate, I lay awake in my bed. I could perfectly describe that kiss, but it was more like telling a story rather than remembering. I had all the words in my head, but had it really been my experience? It was getting harder to tell. I looked across the street. Hugh Emming's room was dark. It had been for some time. I hadn't seen him in days, and I wondered if he was okay. Maybe he knew something about this thing that I didn't. Maybe there was a trick to it. I just had to try harder. I figured the problem was the me staying behind. The one stuck on the bed, holding the plate. I was too disconnected, and I was too quick to throw my copies away. So instead, I'd do a marathon. I'd stay under there for days, letting them do everything. I figured if I cut my original self out of the picture, that meant everything else had to become more real. It made sense, like how you can taste better when your eyes are closed. I put a wet towel over my eyes, a pillow behind my neck, and covered the bed completely, and I would stay under there longer than I ever had before. I could immediately sense a change. All the other versions were so much clearer. I could hear my shoes against the ceramic tiles of the school cafeteria, and at the same time I could feel the strings of the gouging in the living room. I'd feel the paper of my father's books as I browsed his library, slowly turning the pages. This was the way the plate was supposed to be used. I could do everything. I could do it all. Now, using it for a day or two isn't that big a deal. You get used to it. At times. You even forget you're in several places at once. It becomes second nature. and you turn into this hub of thoughts and experiences. You compartmentalize things, and you get praised for doing so. My parents were prouder of me than they'd been in years. My father would smile more. My mother, too. I could skip class with Leisha and still read the course textbook 6 times over before the next day. I just kept doing it. There was no reason not to. I couldn't find a single problem with it, and it just went to show how much of a blessing this really was. No wonder Yueming was such a wonder child. He had a trick up his sleeve all along, and as time passed, I would start to forget that none of it was really real. It wasn't my own eyes reading those books, or my ears hearing Lisha's words. But I didn't care. But one Monday morning, when I was in science class, I noticed something strange. A version of me was sitting behind that desk, and my fingers started to move on their own, like I was playing the guzheng. But that version of me was at home. My teacher gave me a curious look, disturbed by the tip-tapping of my nails. I laughed a little. "Sorry," I said. "Please don't mind me." But it wasn't just me saying it. I said it in 3 different places, including to my Beijing tutor. My actions started to bleed over from one place to another, intermingling. I figured I might need some kind of reset, like a computer. I needed to get back on my feet, dust myself off, and have a proper night's sleep without stuffing myself under the bed with the plate. Perhaps I'd used it for too long, which sent an uncomfortable thought up my spine. How long had I been using it? I had no idea. Out of the blurred sea of experiences, I couldn't find that one mind in the dark, stuffed under the bed. I couldn't feel the towel over my eyes or the weight of the stone. I could see and hear a lot of things, but it was all just copies of a copy of a copy. Dulled senses slowly breaking down. The part of me playing the guzheng got up from his seat and wandered upstairs, but his steps got confused with the pace of another me, the one leaving science class to use the bathroom. They both tripped, but one of them blinked out of my mind. I had the one in my father's library put down a memoir and get up from his seat. "What's happening?" I said, in 3 places at once. "What is this?" A version of me stumbled into the school bathroom, the girls' bathroom. It turns out, Lisha was leaning against the sink, talking to a friend. When I entered, her friend excused herself. Lisha smiled at me, proud of me for taking some initiative, but she could see something was off. One version of me was opening a door, making the one in the bathroom wildly swing an arm as if I was having a seizure. "What's going on?" she asked. "Are you all right?" "I don't know," I said. I could hear my voice echo in the bathroom and the kitchen and the library. "Something's wrong," I continued. "It's not working." "What's not working?" she asked. "What are you talking about?" I opened another door, and the one version of me making lunch in the kitchen suddenly swung around, spilling boiling water all over my left arm. The pain was immeasurable. It was one thing to feel a burn, but to feel it in several places at once. It's indescribable. I fell to the floor screaming, tearing at my clothes. I saw Lisha's face turn from worry to terror as she called out for help. Then she saw something in me. I could see a vague reflection of myself in her eyes, and as she blinked, I disappeared. There were less and less of me left. The one in the kitchen, gone. The one in school, gone. The one in front of the computer, gone. Heartbeats blinking out of existence like the stars going dark. Finally, it was just the one who'd been reading in my father's library. I lumbered up the stairs, trying to convince myself that the pain I felt wasn't real, that it was just a distant memory. The boiling water had never touched me. I got to my room. I was so cold and empty, it was just one left. What happened? I knelt down next to my bed. My pulse pounded in my chest like a jackhammer. Had it really been that long? Didn't I used to have a copy that was supposed to check on me? Had I forgotten? What if I was dead? My hands cramped around the fabric as my sweat-stained palms burned. I could still feel the boiling water. I could still see Lisha's terrified face. None of it was real, and in another sense, all of it was. So I pulled back the covers, and I looked under the bed. I must have lost at least 40 pounds. I couldn't recognize myself. Skin and bone, clutching the plate like a dead houseplant. I pulled myself out. I barely weighed a thing. I lift myself up and place me on top of the bed. There were spider webs in my hair. My fingers were thin, like branches of a dead tree. It struck me that they reminded me of the branches I'd found under Yueming's bed. Holding that plate to begin with, realization struck me. Those weren't branches. That had been Yueming. The real Yueming. I'd pulled the plate from the root, killing every copy of him. That's why I hadn't seen him for so long. I'd taken all away, and I had no idea. I hadn't even recognized him as human. He must have stayed under his bed too, clutching the plate like it was his entire world. I'd pried it from his dry, callous hands, without knowing they were hands to begin with. I didn't know what to do. I paced back and forth. I couldn't tell if I was even alive. There was some movement, but I couldn't feel it. I couldn't see it. For all intents and purposes, it was just one of me left. If this version of me disappeared, there'd be nothing to take my place. But what would happen if that original me died? Wouldn't that mean that there was no one left holding the plate? Wouldn't that mean I would go away forever? There was a tingle in my fingertips. I could feel something in my hands. A numbness. I was running out of time. I hurried downstairs. I picked up the phone and dialed the emergency services, almost dropping the phone as I hurried back up. My tongue slurred as I told them the address and where to find me. I don't think I'm breathing, I repeated over and over. I don't think I'm breathing. But I was a version of me, at least. Or was that the real me? Was I breathing or just remembering what breathing felt like? Panic. My eyesight blurred. The operator was telling me to stay calm, that someone was on the way. As they did, the phone slipped out of my hands and hit the floor. My legs were shaking. I blinked, but my eyes were going dark. I still had one thing to do. I forced the stone plate out of my disheveled hands, reached up, and slid it into the space above the ceiling lamp. I couldn't have them take it. They wouldn't know what to do with it. I fell to the floor, and I couldn't get back up. I tried to fumble in the back of my mind, reaching for that distant space where I'd come from. The original me had to be there. There had to be a mind there. There had to be something left. I couldn't go out like this. I couldn't die. I couldn't just disappear. But I did. There's nothing that can explain the sensation I felt, because there was nothing to feel. It'd be like trying to explain what the world was like before I was born. I don't miss that time. I don't know it. I wasn't a formed consciousness. But even if you're there for it or not, time marches on. Every minute is a minute, no matter how you experience it, or if you're there to experience it at all. And at some point, the clock in my mind started ticking again. Time slipped back into my world, and blood pumped back into my senses. A pulse. I hear something, someone called out. Keep pushing. I couldn't open my eyes. I couldn't blink another me into existence. This was it. A darkness, and a distant voice calling out. A pressure on my arm, and something cold on my face. An ache in my chest as it rose and fell. I was being taken to the hospital. I was being saved. But just the one. My left eye opened in the middle of the night. A dark room. My mother had stepped out to get a cup of tea. My father was asleep in the waiting room. There were cables and tubes and machines. So much effort to keep me breathing, to keep my heart pumping. And all I could give in return was one open eye, looking up at the ceiling. A tree outside was dancing in the wind, casting a long shadow across the wall. I could imagine it as a 12-fingered hand, as pale and skinny as mine. Then something dark. A figure blocked the moonlight coming in from the window, killing the playing shadows. I looked to the left. He barely looked human. A tall, skeleton-like man. His hair long and white. His lips drawn back in a death's head grin. His fingers long and thin. I'd seen him before. He leaned in, gently placing a scalpel on my chest and pushing it up against my throat. He whispered into my ear with an unsteady throat. "Where is it?" I looked at him. I couldn't answer even if I wanted to. He pressed the scalpel harder. "Where?" I tried to answer, but I couldn't. He leaned on my chest, pressing the air out of my lungs. But as he leaned back, air rushed into me. Enough for me to form an answer. "Ceiling lamp." I wheezed. He looked at me, his eyes clouded in a gray haze. This was the wondrous boy across the street. This was the toll it was taking on Yueming, and his legendary success, the cost of perfection. He tapped me on the chest in a silent thank you and left the scalpel behind. When my mom came back, the room was empty. She just sat down and finished her tea in silence, praying for me to get better. The plate was long gone when I got home. I had to use crutches for the rest of the school year, and my parents were instructed to keep me calm and rested. They couldn't explain my extreme weight loss and dehydration, but it could partially be the result of immense stress-induced trauma. I needed rest, proper nutrition, and time to recover. I think that even without the doctor's orders, they'd have let up the pressure. Almost losing me was a wake-up call. They couldn't stop telling me how proud they were, and how worried they were. Maybe they truly didn't know, or maybe they were just ashamed of being called out. I couldn't tell. I'd still see Wemming every now and then, the perfect boy across the street. When he moved to Shanghai, the entire block came to see him off. I watched him from my bedroom window, his perfect hair and bulging physique. But I saw something in his eyes that others didn't. A little shine, like the reflection of something distant and alien, like the sheen of the eyes of a porcelain doll, not quite real. And when he loaded a particularly large wooden box into his moving van, he looked up at my window. He knew that I knew what was in it. And just like always, he waved. And I waved back. It's been years, but I still think about you, Wemming. I wonder if I want to go back to that kind of scattered life. Yes, I could do it all and see it all, but I couldn't really value any of it. Not even my first kiss. Luckily, that was just the first of many. Li Xiao and I went to the same university, and we've been inseparable for years. And I dare say, our second kiss was much better than our first. We had a beer together, and my heart hasn't stopped fluttering ever since. I was there, all of me, and to be able to give yourself to one thing, to 100%, has a value that can't be measured in success. She told me about that day in the school bathroom. She couldn't explain it, but to her, it had been like I was never there, like she thought I was there, and when others came running, I was just gone, like waking from a dream. But sometimes I get cold. I get this overwhelming sense of loss, like I'm not living up to my full potential, like I am missing so much life, just staying in one place, doing one thing. How can you value having a meal with a loved one if you could have 10 meals with 10 loved ones? And when this me is gone, what remains? But those thoughts dwindle and pass. And what remains is a warm, comforting thought that yes, I could be doing other things, but there's value to living in the now, to make your own decisions, and to have those decisions cost something. If we can do it all, does any of it really matter? I can't say. I'm not the smartest kid on the street. For that, you'd have to ask Wemming. Story 4. We serve everyone here at Smiley's, no exceptions. Part 1. If you told high school me I'd end up working at a fast food restaurant after college, young me would be pretty upset. I had straight A's, a nice Ivy League college chosen, and a sweet scholarship. College went even better. I was getting A's and everything was popular and played sports. Everything was going my way, until my accident. Turns out it's usually a good idea to look both ways before you cross the street. After a few months in a coma, things weren't looking great for me. Even after waking up, doctors told me that with the head trauma I experienced, I wouldn't be able to go back to school. Didn't stop me from trying, but they were right. That's a few $1,000s I won't get back. Going back to my hometown, my only option was to look for work. The problem is, no one wants to hire someone who can barely add numbers that go into the double digits. Things were looking rough until something caught my eye, an old tattered paper stapled to a power line that said, Smiley's, looking for late-night worker, no experience necessary. The bottom of the paper had a cartoon clown grinning wide, with the motto, we serve everyone with a smile. Even though the paper was ancient, they were still hiring. The chipper voice on the phone told me, we're always looking to hire here at Smiley's. Thanks for your application. I could practically hear the grin through the phone. We've been desperately needing a late-night worker, and you sound like the perfect fit. Come by tomorrow night, and we'll get you trained up for your first shift. While walking over for my training, I noticed the restaurant was located pretty far on the edge of town, which is probably why I'd never heard of it. Entering the empty store, I heard a cheerful voice say, "You must be the new hire. So good to meet you." My boss, who I later found out was named Ryan, was the definition of average. Think of the most regular guy you can think of, and you're thinking of Ryan. "Let me show you around and tell you a few of the rules," he said as he ushered me around the counter and into the kitchen. Overall, training was pretty simple. Thankfully, I'd worked a little in a restaurant before, so I was already familiar with the basics. How to cook chicken so it wouldn't kill anybody. Stuff like that. But there were a few things Ryan told me that caught me off guard. Like how, when I'm done in the freezer, I should make sure to lock it and never open it if I hear banging from inside. And if the lights in the lobby start to flicker, I'm supposed to take one of the papers beneath the counter and burn it. There were a few other things, but I just finished up my shift and can barely keep my eyes open. I'll update this journal thing later. Doctors told me it might help to write down what happened every day to help with my memory or something. They probably explained it, but head trauma, coma. I didn't think it was important enough to write down. Update. Something interesting happened. Who could have guessed? I originally thought the weird rules were some kind of new worker hazing ritual and didn't take them too seriously. Most shifts are pretty uneventful, with maybe a dozen people coming in on a busy night, and barely 3 on a slow one. On one of the slower nights, I was sitting in the kitchen, before you restaurant leaders start whining about sitting. I was in a coma for several months. I'm allowed to sit every now and then when I saw the lights flickering in the lobby. What Ryan told me came to mind, and I chuckled. They weren't going to get me this easily. I ignored it, and the flickering kept going for a few more minutes until suddenly all the lights turned off. I jumped and slowly stood up, being careful not to bump into anything hot in the kitchen. Easier said than done. Turning on my phone's flashlight, I worked my way to the front counter. "Very funny, guys, you got me. You can turn the lights on," I nervously said, glancing around. No one responded. "I get it. I'm new. You have to play pranks on me." "Super funny," I added, frustration starting to surface. Still no response. I walked into the lobby and fumbled for the light switch, flicking a few times, but the store stayed shrouded in black. Suddenly, a loud bang came from behind me. It sounded like some pots or pans from the back fell. H, hello?" stuttered out of my mouth, my knees shaking. I fumbled behind me, hands grasping beneath the counter, looking for the papers and lighter Ryan told me about. While I was never superstitious, in that moment, all my logic and higher-level thinking went out the window. I've never been the brave type, and horror movies are a no for me. My hands found a paper and lighter, and I fumbled to flick it on, barely managing to light it without burning myself. My breathing slowed a little, and I waited anxiously for the lights to turn on. Nothing happened. I turned around, gazing at what little I could see from the light of the burning paper. Just barely at the edge of the flame's glow was the silhouette of someone, but just as my eyes were about to focus, the paper burned out. I yelled and ran as fast as I could to the manager's office, barely avoiding slipping on the greasy floors. Reaching the door and slamming it shut and locking it, I fumbled with my phone and quickly called 911. No answer. I called again. Still no answer. I leaned against the door and slid down, my legs shaking even more than before. Out of desperation, I called Ryan, a memory bubbling up about calling him if anything went wrong. "Hello. How's the shift going, Andrew?" "Everything going well," Ryan's always cheerful voice said, shocking me with its loudness. Ryan, please help me. There's someone in the store. The lights aren't working. I can't call police." I whispered desperately before getting interrupted. "Son, did you forget what I told you during training? Burn the paper if the lights flicker," Ryan said, still cheerful as ever given the circumstance. I thought it was a prank. The lights turned off, and I burned the paper, and nothing happened. I pleaded, hoping he was going to help. "Well, obviously burning the paper after the lights go off isn't going to do anything. You have to do it before they turn off. The burning is what scares off Bill from coming in. But once he's in, burning won't do anything to him." "Bill?" Ryan never mentioned that. And who would be scared of burning paper? A global warming activist? My mind was desperately looking for answers. Now that he's in the store, He won't leave without a stern removal. Where are you right now? Ryan asked. The manager's office. I whispered, desperately listening for any sound from the kitchen. Good. Look in the drawer. There should be a crucifix in there. Now, I don't like using it. It tends to upset some of our special guests, but it works as a backup. What do you mean, crucifix? Am I in a horror movie? I whispered aggressively, trying to keep my voice down. Well, how else are you supposed to get Bill out? He said, as if he were answering a basic question like if the sky is blue. He won't hurt you. Not as long as you have the crucifix. Just hold it out and walk around the kitchen until the lights turn on. With that, he hung up. Nervously, I fumbled around the room until I found the crucifix Ryan was talking about. Peeking out the door, I slowly walked into the pitch-black kitchen, holding the crucifix in one hand and my phone flashlight in the other. I crept through the kitchen. Each step felt like a century. I pleaded silently that Ryan was right. Approaching the front counter, I heard what sounded like a sharp exhale coming from right in front of me, and suddenly, the lights turned on. My head quickly turned, scanning every part of the kitchen, but found nothing. Whatever had been there was gone now. I breathed a sigh of relief and wanted to sink to the floor, but then I heard honking coming from the drive-thru. I looked at the cameras and saw someone sitting at the window, waiting to order. From that shift on, I started listening to all the rules Ryan told me about. I already wrote down 2, but there were some more. If you hear something in the drive-thru headset talking about taking your soul, read the laminated paper by the window. If you find weird pieces of unidentifiable meat mixed in with the fried chicken, fry it in the special fryer, and then put it in the bottom of the warmer for our special guests. Speaking of guests, Ryan told me it's incredibly important that no matter what, we always serve everyone, regardless. They really take the whole. We serve everyone with a smile to heart. Now, before you judge me for not quitting on the spot, the job paid really well, and it was the only place that would hire me. Ryan promised nothing bad would happen as long as I followed the rules. And honestly, I was curious. I found out that some of the store's regular visitors usually get a name. I already had the pleasure of meeting Bill, and apparently, there are quite a few more, but Ryan said he'd tell me about them later. That's all I can write for now. I try to record some of my other encounters with the visitors of the store whenever I get the displeasure of meeting them. We serve everyone here at Smiley's. No exceptions. Part 2. I'm back again. Bill hasn't gotten to me yet, though he's tried. If you're a bit confused by that, long story short, I worked a midnight shift at a fast food restaurant that has some weird rules. Last time I didn't follow them, the Shadow Man, known around the store as Bill, tried to steal my soul, or order some chicken tenders. I didn't really stop to ask. At around 3 a.m., I was waiting at the drive-thru window, looking at my phone, when I heard a tap. I looked up and almost jumped out of my skin. All I could see were a pair of long, gangly legs that looked like they were wearing what was left of suit pants. The tapping continued, and the source came into my view, a long, slender, gray hand. I desperately wanted to ignore this customer, but ignoring it would be breaking one of Ryan's rules, and I did not want to repeat of last time. Slowly pulling the drive-thru window back, I said in my best, I love working here, and am definitely not freaking out voice. Welcome to Smiley's. What can I do for you today? A voice that reminded me of my chain-smoking grandma, only deeper, answered, Can I have the 3 combo? Odd choice. Apparently even freakishly large, lanky men still enjoy chicken nuggets. But who am I to judge? That'll be $8.99, I said hesitantly. I didn't really know how he was planning on paying, but at this point in the job, it was almost automatic to say it. Keep the change, Mr. Lanky said. That's what I decided to call him until Ryan tells me what his name is, and handed me $15.65. I have zero clue where he got this money, and honestly, I don't care. He tipped me better than the normal customers do. I went to the fryers and started cooking fries while getting his nuggets ready. The container at the bottom of the warmer was full of odd pieces of meat, if you could call it that, and I tried to find the most nugget-like ones. I ended up picking what resembled a chicken heart, a few toes of some kind, and a fish eyeball, which I'm pretty sure blinked at me when I picked it up. With Mr. Lanky's order packed up and put in a bag, I braced myself and opened the window again. Here's your order. Have a smiley day. The cheerfulness was really struggling. Mr. Lanky reached down and plucked the bag with two of his long, gangly fingers and began to walk away. I quickly closed the window and with a sigh of relief released all the tension that had built up in my body. Taking a quick glance, I saw a car pulling up into the drive-thru. I turned my headset on. Welcome to Smiley's. What can I do for you today? I answered. This time, the joy of seeing a human being made it easy to be cheerful. Yeah. Can I get a 2 combo with a large fry, please? The voice asked through the drive-thru headset. As they asked, I heard banging coming from the freezer. Sorry, we're out right now. That overall was on the tamer side of encounters I've had. After I told Ryan about Mr. Lanky, he told me his official name was Nuggets. I wasn't the only one to notice his ordering habits. Ryan also started telling me about some of our other customers and the best ways to serve them. He gave me a pamphlet with the words Smiley Special Guest Reference on it. He told me it had a list of customers and how to interact with them. I skimmed through it, looking for our friend Nugget on there. And yep, I saw him. Just a name though. None of the entries have pictures. Not surprised. The only thing to keep in mind for him is to not look at his face and give him an eyeball if you have one. I knew the eye was a good choice. I decided to keep the pamphlet with me next to the drive-thru window. Ryan said if anything weird started to happen when someone was ordering, just check the pamphlet. I tried to read through it, but there are a lot of entries, and my head starts hurting after reading 2 or 3. If anything unusual, or at least more unusual than normal, happens, I'll use the pamphlet and figure out what to do. Thankfully, I didn't need the pamphlet for a few days after Ryan gave it to me. The shift was going smoothly. The floors were swept, sauces stocked, read the Latin sheet into the drive-thru headset, and wrote down what we were low on. The store was extra slow, with no one ordering for the past 3 hours, and the time was dragging on. I sat in the kitchen, watching the drive-thru cameras, begging for something. My freezer buddy hadn't banged on the door all night, and I thought he might not be feeling good. Then the cameras turned black. Blinking and rubbing my eyes, I looked again, absolutely black. I looked out the window. Same thing, a pitch black void. I got up and walked to the drive-thru window and could hear something coming from the drive-thru headset. It squeezes my head, so I take it off if no one's ordering. The sound coming from the headset was pure static. The pamphlet was in the corner of my vision. I picked it up and skimmed through it, looking for anything that would help. I saw, if you hear a dead relative. Nope. Mannequin-like appearance, not helpful. Static in the headset and pitch black outside. There we go. I skimmed it, trying to figure out what to do. The pamphlet said, bag of 6 combo, large fry. And that's what I did. Bracing myself, I pulled open the window and went to hand the order out, but forgot 6 combos come with 4 tenders, not 3. Quickly, I turned back around and threw the extra tender in. I assumed the black void wouldn't mind, and my eyes glanced over the pamphlet again, still laying half open. Without even particularly focusing on anything, I noticed the final sentence. Whatever you do, do not reach outside. Simply throw the order out the window. A shiver raced up my spine. I didn't want to find out what would have happened if I reached my hand out like I was about to. Going back, I carefully pulled open the window, my hand shaking. I could feel beads of sweat forming on my forehead. With a small swing, I tossed the bag through the window. It vanished the second it crossed the barrier between inside and outside. Not gradually like it was lost in the dark or fog. It vanished instantly. No sound. I slammed the window shut and backed away, praying that the eternal void outside didn't want extra sauces. A few seconds passed, and in the blink of an eye, my regular view outside the window returned. But it was bright, too bright for 1 a.m. I checked the clock, and it read 5:59 a.m. How? Making the order barely took me 10 minutes, and I know it was near 1 when this ordeal started. A voice snapped me out of my confusion. If you got everything done, you're all good to go, a female voice said. I think it's all done. Sorry if I missed anything, I answered hesitantly, turning to see Mandy, one of my co-workers. She was on the shorter side, around 5 feet 3 inches, with brown curly hair and a lightly freckled face. I had met her before, usually when she took over for me in the morning. Don't worry about it. You look like you had a long night, Mandy said, looking at me with her usual one-dimpled grin. I wanted to mention what happened, but remembered that Ryan told me it's best not to tell the day shift workers about the unusual things. Something about no point in stressing them out. I quickly grabbed my stuff, making sure to get the pamphlet. I had a feeling I was going to need this thing if I wanted to make it to the end of my shifts in the future. That's all I have time for. I wrote this during my shift, and I have a few things to do before I clock out. And the lights are flickering again. Good or well, Bill is wanting to say hi. We serve everyone here at Smiley's, no exceptions. Part 3. There's a new night shift worker. Ryan introduced him to me. He looks about 50, with some gray hairs peeking through his black hair. I'm pretty sure I've seen it stain his collar. His name's Phil, and he seems like a decent guy. He hasn't given me a reason to dislike him yet, at least. I gave Phil the rundown, how to stock the soda fountains, how to use the fryers, and not to open the freezer if it's banging, the usual. When I mentioned the unique rules we follow here, Phil just chuckled, winked at me, and said, "Oh, I'm sure. I'll make sure to do all that." I insisted I wasn't joking, that he really needed to follow them. He waved me off. My ex-wife used to be into all that new age spiritualism and spirit talking, and trust me, the only thing it killed was our marriage. He laughed, a deep belly laugh, the kind only someone going through a midlife crisis can manage. I let Phil run the kitchen while I did drive-through. The customers weren't bad. I've gotten used to most of them, and if anything happened inside, I could handle it. Phil didn't seem like he was planning on dealing with it. Everything was going fine. A decently busy night, with only 1 or 2 unique customers. Nuggets came back. I hadn't seen him in a few weeks. A family of mannequins ordered from a white van. Weird, but not even top 5 around here. Phil was holding up, more or less. I had to keep telling him to stop smoking in the kitchen. But other than that, fine. Then the freezer started banging. I had warned him. Just let it be. It goes away on its own. But Phil was not the leave it alone type. He marched over and yanked the freezer door open. "What the hell is that thing?" he yelled as I ran into the kitchen. Before I could stop him, he stepped inside and pulled the door shut behind him. Well, there goes our newest employee. Sucks. It was nice having company. Loud thuds followed, and a shriek echoed through the kitchen. Then silence. I turned to walk away. The freezer door creaked open. I forgot to lock the freezer. Whatever thing was in there was coming for me next. I bolted toward the door, praying I could lock it in time, and saw Phil step out. "Shouldn't be a problem no more," he said, wiping his hands. Found the hole that thing had been using to get in. Covered it up real good. He said it like he hadn't just gone hand-to-hand a demon pig. "Oh, I've checked the freezer before. Just out of curiosity. Never found anything. What was in there?" I asked. "Just some kind of raccoon. It was real messed up, though. Must have been hit by a car. No hair. I think there was an extra arm growing out of it. I must have looked horrified. What? You never seen a raccoon before." At the end of shift, Ryan came in and asked how Phil's training went. I gave him the basics. Left out the freezer incident. Ryan might have gotten Phil in trouble, and honestly, Phil's kind of grown on me. "That's good." Ryan said, smiling, "I'm sure it'll be a great fit. Don't go in there." Phil had started to open the white door in the lobby. "This isn't the pisser?" he asked. "Bathroom's over there," Ryan said, pointing at the clearly labeled door. "No one's supposed to go in there unless the owner says so." He leaned in and whispered, once Phil was out of earshot, "Anyone who goes and there never comes back." A shiver ran up my spine. Ryan had never been that direct before. But don't worry. As long as you work hard, you'll never need to go in there. Got it. I muttered, good. Now go clock out and enjoy your day. Things were going well for the next few weeks. Phil and I started alternating shifts, only working together on the busy nights. I developed a pretty good system to make sure I got all my work time, and that left me with time to organize the Smiley special guest reference. I sorted entries by indicators like affects headset or affects cameras. Figured it'd be easier to use in the heat of the moment. One night, while reorganizing pamphlet, a car pulled into the drive-thru. I grabbed my headset. Yeah, can I get a 5 combo, please? The voice buzzed through, with a medium fry on the side, no salt, and a Smiley meal but apples instead of fries. Oddly specific order. Way more thought than we usually get from stoned teenagers ordering 4 burgers. Absolutely, I said, pull up and pay at the window. As the car approached, something felt off. The voice was familiar, which wasn't too odd. We get repeat customers. But something was off about the order. I'm almost positive someone had ordered the exact same thing earlier. Then the car reached the window. I looked up and almost jumped out of my skin. The driver had no face, just a pale, smooth head with dents where the eyes should have been. Its mouth stretched into a massive, toothy grin, rows of long, jagged yellow teeth. I kept it together. Somehow, it handed me cash, bony, pale fingers with black veins and crooked brown nails. Carefully grabbing the money and putting it into the register, I said, I'll have your food out in a moment. I started closing the window. It shot its arm forward, gripping my hands with its cold, clammy fingers. Make sure you get my order right. It rasped. Of course, I replied, turning away and gasping for air. What the hell was that? Was I supposed to do something before it ordered? Was it already too late? I grabbed the pamphlet and flipped like my life depended on it. It probably did. There it was. Copycat will mimic a previous customer's voice and order and may insert a substitution. You must serve the original order. That was it. That's what had been bothering me. But what was the original order? My mind scrambled to remember. 5 combo, medium fry with no salt, and a Smiley meal with apples? Or was it fries? Think Andrew. I always stock apples at the start of every shift. If a pack's missing, then it means the order comes with apples. I opened the cooler. The container was missing a pack. Got it. Apples for the Smiley meal. Unless I forgot to restock. And what if the original order did assault? My heart raced. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. The eyeless face was pressed against the window. Its breath condensed on the glass. It knew I didn't remember. I had to choose. Fast. I cooked a 5 combo, medium fry with salt, and added a Smiley meal with apples. No salt fries are weird enough that I would have remembered. At the window, I handed it the bag. Can you tell me what I ordered? It asked, its grin growing impossibly wide. A 5 combo, medium fry, and a Smiley meal with apples. I replied, voice cracking. Are you sure? Its hand hovered just above the bag. No, I wasn't. I had no idea if I got it right. Yes. It stared. Then, slowly the grin faded. Have a good night, it said and drove off. I stood frozen. Was the order right? Would he have told me if it was wrong? I had no way to find out. The rest of the night was a blur. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow felt like it was staring at me. Eventually, the sun rose. 6 a.m. hit, and I said goodbye to the opener. I'm writing this now in the parking lot, hoping that putting it down somewhere will calm me down. It's not working. I don't know how much more of this I can take. Story 5. I ordered a pizza from a place that doesn't exist anymore, and now it won't stop showing up on my phone. This is probably just a glitch, or maybe a prank or something. I don't know, but I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. It happened a few nights ago. I couldn't sleep, and I was super hungry, like stomach growling, head throbbing, kind of hungry. It was around 1:45 a.m., and of course everything around me was closed. I opened Uber Eats just to check, thinking maybe I'd get lucky with some crappy gas station place, or whatever. Most of it was grayed out, But then I see this listing near the bottom, Uncle Sal's Pizza. I'd never heard of it before. No reviews, no address listed, no hours, nothing. Just this blurry picture of a slice of pepperoni pizza that looked like it was taken on a flip phone through a dirty window or something. Honestly, it looked kind of gross. But I was tired and starving and didn't care. The menu only had 3 things. 1 topping slice, $5. House special, $13. The usual slice, $9. No descriptions. Nothing else. I picked the usual slice because I don't even know. The name felt weirdly familiar. Like something I'd heard before, but couldn't place. Just felt kind of personal, I guess. Anyway, I ordered it. The app said ETA 11 minutes, which made no sense at that hour. But whatever. It ended up taking like 15. I never saw a car. Never heard anyone. Just got the notification that it had been delivered. When I opened the door, the box was just there, dead center on the porch. Uber Eats had a photo of it, but the photo looked old, like grainy and discolored, like something scanned from a printout. The box itself looked straight out of 1998, red and white checkerboard pattern. Weird cartoon chef on the front, and it was kind of yellowed, like it had been in storage for years. Inside, the pizza was warmish, but clearly not fresh. The cheese had hardened in that gross way where it doesn't pull apart, just rips. The pepperoni was shriveled and crunchy on the edges. It smelled like, I don't know how to describe it. Not spoiled, just old, like basement pizza, but also familiar, almost like something from when I was a kid. I ate 1 slice and tossed the rest. It wasn't even good. I just felt weird. Next morning, I go to check the listing again, and it's just gone, like it was never there. Not marked as closed. Completely vanished. Even the order in my history just said unavailable. No name, no contact, nothing. That creeped me out more than I want to admit. So I called my mom later that afternoon, just randomly asked, "Hey, do you remember a pizza place called Uncle Sal's?" And she went quiet for a second and was like, "Where did you hear that?" I told her it came up on Uber Eats, and I ordered from it. She got really quiet after that. Then she goes, "That place shut down when you were little. Like little. You don't remember?" Apparently. It used to be in this old strip mall not far from where we used to live. She said we went there a few times when I was a toddler. Birthday parties, stuff like that. She said it always smelled weird, even back then. Then she said something that actually made me feel sick. The owner, Sal, he killed himself in the restaurant after they shut it down. I think you were 4? They found him in the dining room. He wouldn't leave after the health department condemned the place. He hanged himself with an extension cord from one of the ceiling fans. I didn't know what to say to that. I don't remember any of it. I don't even remember the place existing. But I drove out there. I had to. It's like 15 minutes from my apartment now. The strip mall's basically dead. One of those places with boarded up windows, trash in the parking lot, and a couple stores that look like fronts for scams. And there it was. The old sign is still up. Uncle Sal's Pizza. The windows are filthy, but you can still kind of see inside. The booths are still there. One of those claw machine things in the corner. Crumpled paper napkins on the floor like it's been frozen in time. And up on the counter, a pizza box. Same design as the one I got. I didn't go in. I just left. I've felt off ever since. And here's the part that really messed me up. Just a few minutes ago, I got a notification on my phone from Uber Eats. Late night hunger? Why not reorder from Uncle Sal's Pizza? I have no idea how it got through. I deleted the app from my phone. I even turned off push notifications from everything. I don't know if it's a bug, or some marketing thing gone wrong, or something else. But the thing is, I can still smell it. That old pizza smell. Like cardboard and dust and warm pepperoni grease. And part of me, a tiny, disgusting part, actually want to order it again.